and all my friends are dead, and I failed them and I didn't get there on time. Because that's what you think. Now, logically, I was off duty. I did the best I could to get there as fast as I could. But in my mind, the guys that would have died for me in a second, they died without me being there next to them, and it bothered me for a long time. It's not that I want to be dead, but I felt like I failed them. One of my childhood crew, one of my best buddies right here, John Sharp, he was on duty. All the guy did was work because he had 2 babies at home. And he wanted to keep his wife home, do it the way our parents did it. Mom stays home, dad goes to work. And he raced in, and he died. And I searched for him, and all these other guys, Hank Miller, Dennis Jr., Al Proby, Jimmy Ritchie's, who died over in Manhattan on a training assignment. And just hundreds of other guys that I can't say I knew all the guys who died, right? But I knew a lot of them personally. Father Judge, my beautiful Irish chaplain, who loaded me into a CAT scan tube, helped pick me up, put me into a CAT scan tube in 1983 when in the end, it turned out that I fractured my cervical 7. It took years for a doctor to figure it out. I couldn't move that night. Couldn't move my feet, my arms. 5, 6 years later, I'm caught in a collapse. I go for another CAT scan, x-rays. Doc goes, whoa, what are you even doing working on this job, on this truck? You fractured your vertebrae years ago. You shouldn't even be able to walk or run around. You should be partially disabled. And he was an Irish guy. He was a fire department doctor, and he was a combat surgeon over in the Gulf. And I said, Doc, the only way I can explain it is in 1993 when I was in a pretty rough fire truck accident. Before I got loaded in the CAT scan tube, Father Judge put his hands on me, and he said, you're going to be okay. Don't worry about this. God's got it. And he loaded me in. And the doctor looked at me. He was an Irish guy, a Catholic guy. He goes, yep, I got it. I get it. That's what happened. Move on. And Father Judge raced in there to pray as the chaos of the towers was going on. There's a video of him, famous documentary. He's in there and he's praying. He's just praying and praying to God for everybody to be okay. And he ended up, from the debris coming down around him, he actually had a heart attack from, dodging this huge piece of structure. They carried him out, and later on he was actually hit with more debris, but it ended up, they think in the end that he just died of a heart attack as that debris crushed next to him. And he was going out to give last rites to the people who were jumping out of the building. And he died tending to his flock, which was the FDNY. He loved us, and we loved him. And I was down there for, we stayed the first night right through. We couldn't see anymore. We couldn't breathe. Literally, we just caked with dust.
Tell me what that morning was like.
Morning, like I try to be forthright with everyone and say, look, I got there after the initial ensuing chaos had taken place. Buildings were hit, buildings were burning, people were jumping. I got down. I saw the second one go down, but I got there to a debris field. And then 7 came down. And we were initially searching for all these attached buildings in the World Trade Center complex because there was reports of people still trapped in there, and we spent hours and hours until we could give an all clear for those buildings. And then we just got upon the pile. There was a couple of Port Authority of New York and New Jersey police officers that were still trapped. And in the end, they were the only survivors that were retrieved after the initial collapses. There was a couple people pulled out within moments or hours. But well into that night, they were the last 2 live souls that were taken out. So we worked on that, bringing in equipment, bringing out, buckets of debris, and we're just frantically, hundreds of guys trying to get to these two police officers. And we kept going back and forth for 4 or 5 days until finally, Chief goes, look, just go home, get home to your families for 12 hours and then get back. And, you gotta check in. So my family wasn't really certain of my fate until, I guess, about 12 hours later, I was able to get off a phone call. And my mom said that my dad he was well retired. He went down in the Staten Island ferry. They were asking for any retirees or anybody that could help. They were assuming that they were going to be bringing over hundreds and hundreds of bodies, and they were going to ship them over on the Staten Island ferry and then bring them to morgue trucks. It never happened because there was no bodies to pull out. Eventually, there was some bodies that were intact that were found after hours and days and weeks of digging. But half of the 2,977 souls that were lost have never been identified. They were not fully intact. I think there was only 200 people that were more or less intact, and that's horrifying. But I got home after 4 days. My wife says, "Well, I have some good news," and I was just not in my right state of mind at all. And she says, "We're going to have another baby." This is my youngest beautiful daughter. And I was just taken back, and I said, "Oh my God, that's great. But, John's having a baby too. His wife, we just found out this morning she's pregnant, but he's dead." And I didn't know how to verbalize that without being harsh. And John was found on Christmas Eve. And strange enough, he was one of the only souls found intact. And his wife was so courageous, she literally went to identify him and take his wedding ring off. And we buried him on Christmas Eve. New Year's Eve. Found on Christmas Eve. And it was so cold. It was near 0 degrees. And I remember having the honor of holding the American flag at a service. And I just would have rather have been dead than to move that flag. And it was so cold. And I ended up with frostbite in my hands because I just didn't want to disrespect my friend. And we had a memorial service prior. It was on November 12th, and it was the day the plane crash went down over in Jamaica Bay, out in Belle Harbor, Queens. And I remember standing in line at his memorial service. It was like a semi-mass, but there was no body. And then we heard the command staff, their radio started just going wild, and it was a plane crash. And they just said, "Look, guys, we need to keep some people here for the service. Respect this family. We got plenty of guys heading over there. Don't just go racing in, because there's an accountability thing. If you go running in off duty to events, they don't want you doing that because nobody knows where you're going. Nobody's looking for you if you don't respond in as a unit, as a squad, or so." And I just remember standing there going, "What the hell's going on? A plane crash, And there was a lot of allegations, suspicions that it was terrorism. And there's still some people that firmly believe it was, because tail assemblies and wings don't just shear off of aircraft. But, I don't want to go there because you'll get hate mail. But I just still don't believe that was a random accident. And, we brought John home and sent him home to God on New Year's Eve. And then it was just months and months and months of digging. And they finally, I think it was May 30th of 2002, where they actually ceremonially closed down the site. It was cleaned out. And still couldn't identify half the people that were found there. And to this day, it's haunting to those families. Like some folks, believe it or not, in the last 2 or 3 years have been identified because they've, I guess, improved the DNA recognition technology. But my lieutenant, Dennis, he's never had closure for his beautiful son. And as a father, that kills me. But it was a horrible place. It was it was like a war movie when we were digging, and within I don't know, an hour, there was fighter jets just screaming over, and you'd see them go mile out and just scream into a turn, bank into a 40, 50 degree turn and come screaming back. And I looked at some of my guys and my crew, I said, are we at war? Because, we still didn't really know what happened. Like, we knew there was an attack, obviously. We were waiting for it because in the late 90s, there was a FDNY training manual with a picture of a sketch of the Twin Towers, and it had a target on one of the towers, and it said, not a matter of if, but a matter of when, be ready, be trained. And I'm just like, whoa, did they know this was coming? Or So the guys who were there in 93, and we kind of always had that in the back of our mind that they're not going to give this up. They're going to come. They're going to come get us. So that morning on, until we really were told otherwise, we thought we were at war, because there was still rumors going around that, there was other aircraft in the air, and they were trying to hit, the White House, and they wanted to hit, other monuments. There was, they were going to hit the stock exchange. They were going to hit, symbolically punch us in the face, these terrorists. And I just remember later on into that night, I broke off to a little area further away from the whole crush of guys, because nobody was really searching over here. And I'm like, maybe we just need to split up our resources. And so I was with this older fireman from my dad's old truck, 172, and looking around, and he stops me. He goes, yo, bro, what do you hear? And at the time, there was just this sand that was just kind of, it almost looked like a dune that was falling away. It was just gray, pulverized sand, and it was just cascading down. And you could hear it like this. And then you could hear this hissing that was just consistent, like a gas leak, and then maybe a water leak. And I said, why? I hear some sort of leak, and I hear the sand. He goes, no. What else do you hear? And I went, nothing. And he pointed at a lady's pocketbook and a lady's shoe and a wallet. They were just kind of straggled in that pile. And he goes, where's the people? And it was almost like a mind game. And I said, bro, I don't know. Where are they? He goes, exactly. They're no longer, bro. He goes, look at the disintegration of this massive structure. That's the World Trade Center. Looks like a freaking sand dune in the desert, and someone just dyed it. Everybody's dead. Nobody's coming out of here. We're wasting our time. And he didn't mean that we were going to give up and not search, obviously, but he knew. He just knew. I guess he had, 30 years of experience and whatever. They were all gone. And they were. For the first 5 days, we clung to hopes that there was guys maybe, or people trapped in, a crevasse, or the structure kind of caved into itself, but left an opening and left an area, and there was enough air. And on our self-contained breathing apparatus, which is our air tanks and the mask, there's an alarm, a motion alarm called a pass alarm. So if you stop moving for 30 seconds, it just cycles and makes this loud, piercing noise. So your fellow rescuers could come find you. It means you're down, right? And for a few days till the batteries died, we heard those pass alarms in the pile underneath, because the guy who was wearing it, who is now dead, well, his pass alarm was doing its job. It was saying, I'm here, come get me. But we couldn't, because they were underneath 40 or 50 feet of debris. And until we could get cranes, and all of the trades guys came in, the iron workers and the heavy duty construction guys, and until we could start really moving stuff and then getting into these areas. And by the time we were able to do that, it was too late. I don't think any of them survived, the initial onslaught because, I'm not a science guy. I have a little bit of night college, but the forces and the physics involved, no one could survive that. It disintegrated structural members. How is a human being of, mostly water and flesh, how are they going to survive that? And that was the outcome. It was just sad because there was thousands of people waiting for news of their loved ones and some sort of, they were still clinging to the hopes that we could find them and that they were somehow miraculously alive. And that didn't happen.
How many friends did you lose? Like from the fire department?
Well, they call it the brotherhood, and now we have female firefighters, the sisters. So within the brotherhood, it doesn't matter where a guy works or he's your brother. And then there's just those levels of friendship, right? Guys from your own crew, and then guys from crew you used to work with, guys you knew from training school, guys you just knew from growing up in the neighborhood. Like John and I grew up together, played football together, baseball together, and then he happened to be the next. We were a single ladder company; they were a single engine company at the time. Now they've combined the two into the same building, but back then, John and I, they were sister companies, so we were one block, one avenue away. We'd respond in on every call together. So, as far as a friend that close, John was as close as it got. But then there was other guys that, just dozens and dozens that a lieutenant who I drove for 10 shifts that was filling in on a vacation coverage where we were. There was just so many interconnecting relationships, guys you knew well, guys you didn't know so well, but you really enjoyed the couple times you worked with them. I knew so many, but worse than that, I know so many now that are dying of cancer. And just an unending amount of guys that are dying of cancer. It's actually scary.
And you picked up leukemia.
Yeah, one of my best buddies, my buddy Bobby and I, we probably in 02, 03, we started noticing that guys were starting to get sick. But it wasn't so severe. It was limited cancer, so they chalked it off to just cancer happens in the fire service. But then all of a sudden, there was this young firefighter, John McNamara, came down with a vicious colon cancer, and he was just gone. Had a newborn baby. And then we realized there's a problem because now guys started coming. Hey, you hear this guy's got cancer. Mark's got cancer. Bobby's got cancer. Nils got cancer. And my friend Bobby said, wow, it's like a minefield. When are we going to step on our mine? And I said, I hope never.
Just from breathing all the debris.
Breathing all toxic debris. And I was there the day that our government sent the EPA rep to tell us everything's great. The air is clean. Well, it wasn't. So I wasn't feeling good starting in about 2007, 2008. I was just a wreck. I just did not feel myself. My weight would go up and down. I'd be so cold, and then all of a sudden I couldn't cool down. Just really weird things. And I kept going to the doctor, and my doctor on the outside actually worked for the fire department as well. So early on, we had issues. A lot of guys were having a hard time. And I went to talk to a counselor myself. I'm not embarrassed to say it. I was having a hard time processing the survivor's guilt. And why is my good buddy dead and I'm not? Why? I needed some answers. So I willingly went, talked to a counselor, and, it helped a bit. But the minute you talk to a counselor, they put something on your medical folder, like a scarlet letter, like, this guy went to a counselor. And then unfortunately, some of the guys started abusing alcohol to ease the pain of everything they've been through, and were still going through. So the command, I think, was chalking off a lot of ailments to alcoholism and PTSD. So in 2011, I went for a routine fire department medical with blood work, and 3 days later, when the results came back, they pulled me off of duty. They relieved me from duty, saying that my bloods had crashed. It was a Friday, and they're like, "So just come in on Monday. Don't overthink it." I'm like, "You're telling me I can't even ride the truck that I could? My platelets were gone, which is your clotter. You're telling me that I can't even ride the fire truck, but don't worry about it." That's kind of conflicting. So I took it upon myself to ask a couple of medical people in my family. I said, "Hey, here's my blood work, what the hell?" And my one brother-in-law, who I love, is one of my buddies. We grew up together. And we call him the Angel of Death. He's a nurse manager. And he went, "Like that, no good." And I'm like, "What the hell you mean?" He says, I don't like it. It doesn't look good." So the doctor strung me out. "Oh, you're overthinking this." And I said, "I think this is cancer. This is appearing as cancer to everybody I talk to." And the doctor, arrogantly enough, said, "Oh, you're another WebMD, right? You're another internet doctor, and you know it." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not going to discount your education and your expertise. But I'm telling you, I feel like I've been dying the last couple of years." Well, 3 weeks after they pulled me from the truck and still hadn't told me what was wrong, I was waiting at the fire department doctor. I went for an appointment to find out what the hell is wrong. And the doctor didn't even show up. She left. She was gone for the day. And I was fading. And I told the charge doctor who was there, the triage nurse intercepted me, and he just took me to the side and he goes, "Look, I just want to be blunt. You're not a drugs guy or heavy boozer, are you?" And I looked at the nurse, and he was there for years. This guy, Jimmy, great guy. And I started tearing up. And now I had a packet going. I had a couple weeks of tests and this and this and this. And I said, "Jimmy, I think I'm dying. I don't know what else to say." He looked at it. He goes, all right. He takes my blood pressure. It's 240 over 140. Now, for a fat Irish Danish guy, I've always had great blood pressure. Very lucky. So he takes it again. He goes, "Whoa," and my spleen was out like a football. It looked like a damn Super Bowl friggin' game ball. And he takes it again, and then he goes, "Oh, shoot." And he goes, "Hold on a minute." And he calls in the charge doctor. And the doctor takes it, and now I was completely red. I looked like a tomato. And I probably look almost like a tomato because I still get that flush stuff. But doctor palpated my spleen, and he looked at my paperwork, and he took the blood pressure one more time, and it was still going up. And he looked at Jimmy. He said, "I think he's going to rupture. His spleen is about to go. Code him, call EMS, advanced life support. Don't send, there's 2 levels of ambulance, basic life support, EMTs, higher levels, paramedics. Send medics. We need to get him out of here now." Well, my doctor comes rolling in because they paged her back, and she's pissed off because we disrupted her lunch. So she gets into a disagreement with the responding paramedic, who takes a look at the jacket I now have of tests and whatever, and just says to anybody who cared, "Why isn't this guy in the hospital?" And this doctor, he was questioning her, and she was pissed. And so he said, "Look, I think this man quite possibly has a blood cancer when you look at what's happening in the spleen and you look at the crash of the platelets." And she just went, "This is just another case of alcohol abuse because, the spleen was huge and the blood pressure is probably PTSD." So he went, "Oh, really? Have a nice day." Raced me over to Methodist, which is a trauma center. And I got in the ambulance with this guy. It's a guy who ran within the street. We used to cut people out of a car wreck underneath the elevated highway, hand them off to this guy. He's a very tall guy, African-American dude. I call him Doc because when I was in the Army, I was a medic, and they call you Doc if you're a medic. So he remembered me, and I said, "Doc, what the F is going on?" And he looked at me. He goes, "Listen, man, I hate to do this, but you're really sick. but don't worry about it. We're not going to send you home without finding out what's going on. So fast forward, they get me in there. Doctor explains to me, he goes, look, we need to drill into your hip, take bone marrow, scan it, look at it, figure out what's going on. I said, well, why are you doing that? He says, well, we think you have blood cancer. I said, I could have told you that a month ago, but okay. So a few days later, remind you, my doctor never shows up, right? She's pissed because someone questioned her. And 3 days later, a team of doctors walks in, and I'm like, whoa, either they're all looking to make a bill here or I'm dying. Because usually you see one doctor, two doctors. There was 6. So they said, look, we give you the good news, we give you the bad news. I said, give me the bad news first. You have something called hairy cell leukemia. You've had it for a couple of years. It's a good thing you got in here. You were a couple of days away from dying. Your platelets, you were gone. You were done. The good news is we've developed a protocol that we've had success getting people into remission. It's technically by the books, never curable, but long-term remissions for we don't know how long. I said, okay, well, how are we going to get to remission? And the guy goes, well, you're not going to enjoy this, but you're going to get 2.5 years worth of chemo in 7 days. There's bags this big that just never stop. And it's vicious. It's caustic. You're going to feel like you're burning to death from the inside out. But that's the chemo doing its job. If it works, you're in remission. I said, well, what if it doesn't work? He said, you're dead. Just like that. I went, okay, fair enough. So I tried to give my family little bits and pieces of what was really going on because I didn't want to horrify them. My wife had just lost her mom, and, it was just a bad time. And so my nurse was this guy, Mike Nunez. He was incredible caregiver, and I had these various other ladies that also, but Mike was like my main nurse. And he told me, he says, once we hooked, they had to actually fly in the treatment from Cleveland Clinic because it's such a rare cancer and it's such a rare medicine that they just don't stock it. So they had to fly it in, First time I got my only jet, it was my chemo on the jet. So I felt like the 1%ers, So Mike told me, he says, once I infuse this, he goes, I have to wear a hazmat suit. He says, if it gets airborne, it'll burn anything in its path. But once it's in, it's okay. So when he went to first do the IV, it spilled and it literally melted the tube. And I started panicking. Mike, you're not putting this crap in my body. What the frick? He goes, I'm sorry. He goes, I got to start it over. And I said, no, you're not doing it. I'd take a pass. I'm good. And he goes, Nels, listen to me. He goes, those 3 beautiful kids that, my kids were young at the time. If you really want to see them again, you got to do this. Or you're going to die. And I said, all right, Mike. I was crying. I said, okay, let's go. Let me man up. Let's go. And he hit me. Now, I've never done drugs. A couple of my friends who have said that, once you infuse yourself with something, you feel that warm feeling or whatever. Well, this crap, it was a burning feeling. It was like, holy, but it was strange because my skin wasn't hot, but I felt like I had a boiling cup of water just flowing through my body. And Mike said, he goes, that's the thing starting its job. He says, unfortunately, you're going to have that for about 7 or 8 days. And I said, Mike, you've done this with people? He says, no, you're the first one. This is such a rare cancer. He goes, but what I was told by the doctors is that the first 2 nights are critical. He said, because this cancer is usually found in elderly men who work in refineries with diesel and kerosene. I think it's like from benzene, so the chemical. He said most of our patients are elderly, and a lot of times in the first or second night, their heart or their liver or their kidneys will give out and they'll die. So he goes, and I asked him to be straight up with me from the beginning, and he was. And he goes, so if you make it through these first couple nights, I think you're in a good spot, bro. All right, Mike. Well, that first night was a wild one. There was this wicked, wicked thunderstorm And it was one of the heaviest rainfalls in New York City history. I think it was like 14 inches in some spots. Roads were flooded. It was crazy. Non-stop lightning for hours. But in my mind, I was imagining it, because once that chemo started coursing through me, I was losing my mind. I couldn't hear. I couldn't see at times. It was vicious. And some patients I've talked to in chat rooms or whatever said that they did drugs in the 60s and that this protocol of chemo was a wilder ride than acid in the 60s. And I'm like, whoa, okay, because I agree. It was wild. Pushing on through the storm, I'm laying there and I'm trying to fall asleep. It's been days now that I was in there. Still hadn't seen my doctor. And I can't sleep, and my body's just being ravaged. And it was the worst feeling in the world. You know, I've been caught in fires a couple times, you know, bad situations, started to burn, and this was worse. And all of a sudden, I'm trying to sleep, and I start seeing a flash, a face of someone I loved who passed. But they'd come, and then they would fade. And they were all smiling. And this went on for a little while. It was like, you know, because I've lost a lot of people, unfortunately. And I started getting like nervous. I'm like, why? Why am I seeing them? I'm like, there's my grandma, there's my grandpa, there's my Irish grandmother. I never met my mom's dad, you know, picture of him. It was weird. It was just, and all of a sudden, as it's going, and I see my buddy Jackie, who I work with in Manhattan, but Jackie's alive. But all these other people had passed. And then the last person is my beautiful Irish mother-in-law, who I adored. She was just such a sweet lady. Went to church every day. She used to call me her boyfriend because we just got each other. I like to talk, you know, and she did too. And all of a sudden, here's my mother-in-law. She passed 6 months earlier. She's kind of shrouded in like white. She just looked beautiful. And she's smiling, and she had this cute little laugh, and she's giggling. And we called her Nan, and I'm trying to reach for her. I'm like, Nan, I want to go. Take me with you. You look so happy. And she says, I am happy, my boyfriend, but no, he's not ready yet. You go back. You go back to Annie and the kids. And no, I'll see you someday, but not now. And she's receding away. And I'm like, no, Nan, no. And she's just giggling, not yet. No, my boyfriend. And she just fades. And I wake up, and I'm just in a fever pitch. And my nurse, who was very religious, she was from the islands, and she says, my fireman, what is going on? And her name is Altagracia, and I explained to her. I said, you know, she said, okay. She says, they're telling you it's good. You just keep fighting. So when they told one of the doctors who was tending to my case the next day, she was an atheist, and we had a previous conversation about faith and whatever, and I was praying at one point. I said, hey, Doc, you want to pray with me? And she said, no, I'd rather not. And being the study of people, I needed to know why. And she said, well, my dad was a heavy-handed Muslim, and I think all of that stuff's bullcrap. And I went, okay, no problem. So now when they told her what happened, and I was having these visions, and I was, you know, whatever, seeing my mother-in-law in heaven, she sent, but this is why she made a shrink come talk to me. So the second to last person I saw was Jack, my buddy, from the firehouse I filled in down South Street, Seaport, Ladder 15. They lost 14 guys. That's where Fitzroy Haynes got thrown off the truck. And I'm like, why the hell did I see Jack? Like, I could figure out, like, everybody I saw was passed. I loved them. They let me know they're okay. Why Jack? So my friend Gene comes in that morning, just prior to this doctor. And he's a big dude, and he doesn't show his emotions, and he's crying. And I'm like, Gino, I go, am I dying, man? Am I dying? He goes, no, man, no. It's not you. Don't worry about it. And I said, well, why are you crying? I'm not crying. I said, you're freaking crying. And he goes, no, I'm not talking about it. And I looked at him, I says, it's Jack, isn't it? And he goes, who the fuck told you? Who? He's furious. I said, I told him not to tell you. I said, tell me what? And he goes, nothing, no. I said, Jackie's dead. And he goes, how do you know? I said, because at 5 o'clock this morning, during my chemo haze or whatever they want to call it, this and that, I said, and I told him, I saw everybody. I saw that guy, and my mother-in-law. I saw Jack. And he looked at me, he goes, Jack died at 5 o'clock this morning. He was killed in a motorcycle accident. And he was upstate. And he crashed. And he landed in a ditch. And he was there dying, and he threw his helmet up on the road. And the helmet bounced in front of a car. And they stopped. And they heard Jack yelling, and he was down there, and his leg was cut off. So they flew a helicopter in with the state police, and the volunteer firemen were there. And Jack beat it, Jack. He looks up at the flight medic, and he goes, what the fuck took you so long, bro? And he was gone. And somehow, in some strange way, I knew. I don't know how. No one told me. I had no cell phone. I couldn't hear anything. I could barely see anything with the chemo. So now my atheist doctor hears all this story, my whole diatribe, and she thinks I lost my fucking mind. So she sends a shrink. So a couple hours later, in walks this man. And in Brooklyn, where we work, we ran into Borough Park, and there's a Hasidic community. So he looked just like a rabbi from the community, and comes walking in. I say, hey, sir, how are you? I said, rabbi? Or he goes, yes, but I'm also a doctor. I said, you here to, talk religion? I thought maybe they sent him as a chaplain. He says, no, I'm actually here for a different reason. I need to know what's going on with you. I says, oh, doc, I got cancer. They're zapping the shit out of me. You see these bags of juice here? He goes, well, doctor says you might be hallucinating or whatever. Tell me what happened. So I go on the whole story like I just told you. And he looks at me and he starts to giggle. And he says, my friend, I believe you. He goes, our religions, it's sort of like working for a corporation. He goes, we all work for this big, big corporation of God. And he goes, but we're in different departments. You're Catholic, I'm Jewish. And he goes, your loved ones are letting you know that it's okay and you need to fight and I told him about Jack and he went, your friend's okay. So, and he's just like, that was it. So I says, doc, so I am losing my mind a little bit with this stuff. He goes, oh yeah. He goes, the chemo's gonna kill everything. But he goes, it's gonna kill what they need to kill. He says, you're gonna have a little while to go before everything's back to normal, physically and mentally. I said, but I'm okay. He goes, yeah. So he goes, so what do you want to talk about now? I said, what do you mean? He goes, you paid me for an hour. That only took 30 minutes. He goes, you want to watch the Yankees? So I sat there with the rabbi watching the Yankee game, So he gave me the old, you're good. And I still to this day, I can't explain that experience. Why? How? But I've lived in this body for 55 years and I know it, as my wife says, there's a whole lot going on up in this, and there is, but I know what I saw. And the conversation with my mother-in-law, because it was just like we were still there talking away before she died. So on my 14th day of my 25 days in the cancer ward, my doctor showed up, finally. But she got to be ordered to show up by the fire commissioner because I don't know why she was ducking me, dodging me, covering her tracks. I don't know. But arrogantly enough, walks in and says to me, had no idea what was wrong. So what is it that's wrong with you today, Lieutenant? And I went, what? Like now, I'm gone. I lost 50 pounds and it was bad. I was praying to die. It was bad. And I said, and I'm like, nah, I can't be hearing this lady, right? I said, pardon me, ma'am? What did you say? I said, I can't hear really well. She said, so what is, and she crosses her leg and so what is it that's wrong with you today, Lieutenant? With that inflection of arrogance. And there's 6 of my guys that are standing around, and they saw my reaction. It was from the soul. It was visceral. It was like I want to crush this lady like I'm in a football game. I said, what did you say? I said, did you even have the courtesy and the respect to look? And I unleashed some expletives. And, as a faithful man, I curse a lot. I'm sorry to anybody who's offended, but I do it. It gets things out. I said, did you even have the effing courtesy to look in my folder to see what's going on? Do you know where I am right? And I leaned up on my arm was tethered, this huge tower of IV. I said, do you even know what ward I'm in here? Do you know where I am? Oh, no. I said, I'm in the fucking cancer ward. I'm not getting out of here for a month. And she goes, I said, I have the rarest form of leukemia. I've had it for years. I was a couple days away from death, and you told me I was a drunk and a nut job. And I go, and I'm dying. And she's like, I'm sorry to hear that. And I went, so am I, ma'am. Now get the F out of my room. You're effing fired off my case. And she's like, excuse me? Now, you don't talk to fire department doctors that way. I said, ma'am, please. I can barely hear you from this crap they're putting through me. I can barely see you. I don't want to do something I'm going to regret and lose my career. I said, get the fuck out of my room. And the arrogance and the indifference that just oozed from this lady, like I didn't even matter. And I'm going, I gave 22 years of my life to this department. I was on the honor guard, the ceremony team, for burying all the guys who passed. And I go, I've given 100% of my soul to this city and this department, and this is how you treat me. So they assigned me another department doctor, and I saw her one more time at a funeral 6 months ago. Looked right at her. Another guy, he died, he got a lung transplant from 9/11, didn't work. There she is. And I just wanted to go up and say, why did you do that? She saw me, turned around. A couple fire marshals approached me and they said, you're not going to confront the doctor. I said, why? Should I? They knew what was going on. I said, nah, that's not how I roll, bro. I was raised better than that. I said, you tell that lady she's disgusting. And I walked away. And you know what? It's okay. I'm past it. I wasn't for a long time. But I spent my life caring about people and helping people. The majority of my adult life was just helping people. And never once did I do half CPR on somebody or half put their fire out or half cut them out of a wrecked vehicle. I did my job. Wasn't the best at it, but I tried my best. And I just was like, wow. But the doctors I ended up with, I had gone down waiting for that doctor that day. I literally passed out. It's the best thing that could ever happen because they saved my life. Because if I kept waiting for her to determine what was wrong, I wouldn't have made it. They said maybe 48, 72 hours. That was it. I was checking out. And it took a really long time to get past. I had a lot of anger. I really did. Because I was retired off the department. I got into remission officially Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving of 11. And by January of 12, I was out the door. They retired me out on medical. That's it. You have 20 years, you have cancer, you're a liability, you're out. And now I'm one January day, I get a call about 6 at night. Congratulations. I'm like, what are you congratulating me for? I don't want to be retired. I want to do 15 more friggin' years. And I take my rescue greyhound out. She's since crossed the Rainbow Bridge, and a great dog, best dog in the world. And I'm out there walking in a snowstorm, and she would listen, this dog. I swear to God, my wife and my kids are tired of hearing me, so my dog would listen. And it was like she understood. You just look up at you. And I just said, Katie, what are we going to do now? And I swear it was like she said, we're just going to have more walks because you're retired. And that was it. It was over. My career was gone. And my wife finally sat me down one day. She goes, look, I was in a funk. It was bad. I was more sad and depressed about losing the department, about putting that helmet on that made me feel like I mattered and I was able to help other people in that capacity. Gone. My life's dream, my life's work, beyond my family, my purpose, and beyond my friends and family, my passion. That's all I had was my friends, my family, and the fire department. That's all that mattered to me. Baseball went away. That was a passion back in the day. That was it. And then I stopped and I said, you know what? Stop being a victim, man. You're still alive. You know, my wife said to me, she goes, you're alive. You have these children. And I remember in the height of the chemo, I begged, please, God, please. My kids are 14, 11, and 9. Please let me see them. Just get to adulthood. Let me help them there. Let me guide them. Let me just even if I have to lay in a hospital bed or a wheelchair, just let me see them get there. And now that they're there, the huge fear that I have every day, and again, it doesn't cause me to not function, but is God gave me what I asked for, that time, because they're adults now. They're finishing up their educations and they're wonderful human beings and they work their asses off. And they bring so much love, goodness to the world. Oh, you let me see it. So now I want to be selfish and say, hey, God, let me hold my grandkids. Let me go to their weddings. Just give me just some more time. Because in this crazy, crazy world, they're tired of hearing me. But every once in a while, they do ask for some advice and some reason. And I try to give them. I just say, look, this is just my experience, my opinion. But it worked. So selfishly enough, I'm asking them for 10 more, 20 more years.
You look healthy.
Well, I'm fat. As my buddies in my whole fire company say, I'm the fattest cancer patient they know, which means they still love me. And I love them. Scary though, so many of them were sick. And there's so many of them who died. You know, when I first got sick, I wasn't in remission yet. And I had to go down to the fire department doctor, and they just had to evaluate how I was doing, the new doctor. And I'm in there, and I see my buddy I've known for years, Larry Sullivan. And Larry was one of those guys, you know, we didn't grow up together, we didn't hang out all the time together, but anytime I saw him, big hug, big greeting. I love the guy, big Irish guy, bear of a man, great fireman. And, you know, in the fire department culture, there's a lot of ball breaking. And Larry worked in Rescue 5, which is the heavy rescue company. They're in Staten Island. They come over the bridge to Brooklyn, and they cover 25% of Brooklyn, all Staten Island. So anytime we caught a working fire on 114, they come cruising over the bridge, and they, you know, their rescue companies are there for any craziness, or God forbid, we go down, they come get us. So good engine and truck companies, we like to tell them, screw you, we don't need you. You know, like it's all that jocularity, you know, macho bullcrap. So I loved when I'd see Larry. He drove, big Irish guy coming across the Rescue 5. Hey, rescue, take up, go back over the bridge, make sure you pay the damn toll, we don't need you. You know, and just big hug. Now all of a sudden I see him and he's in the clinic. And he looked like he lost a lot of weight, but he looked great. He looked great. And I said, Larry, geez, you look fantastic. What are you doing? He goes, Nels, I'm sick. And I got cancer. And I took his arm and I said, I'm sorry, bro. I said, I'm with you. I know. I got it too. And he told me what he had. It was in the duodenum and it was spreading. And, you know, they were fighting it, chemo, radiation, and this and that. He gives me a big hug. And he looks me in the eyes. And I know his brother Tommy well. Tommy was a police officer, my neighbor. He says, don't worry, brother. I'm 3/4 Irish and I'm 1/4 Danish. He says, we're two big mix. This shit ain't getting us. We're going to beat it. And a year later, I'm standing at his funeral. As they're carrying him in, this 290-pound bear of a gentleman is now 125 pounds emaciated. And those bastards didn't beat us that day, taking down our buildings. But man, they're punching the shit out of us all these years later. But we still keep getting out. Still keep swinging. And now I go home and I go, God, here's Larry. You have 5 kids. He's got grandkids. He's the greatest guy in the world. Like, why? And now it's 10 years later, 11 years later, and I'm still, why? We just buried, another buddy of mine a couple months back. And then month before that, I pray every night, my whole life. I started doing it when my dad was sick. And I have a chain. And I put people that I love in it. And my buddy John, the other John, the baseball player who died of leukemia when he was 14. And I remember going to his funeral and watching his mom. And he looked just like his mom. She's so destroyed. His father was destroyed. And every single night since then I've prayed, please let him be in heaven. And then I added and added and added. And now if I want to mention by name everybody I cared about, everybody I loved, everybody who I stood their funeral, it takes me 45 minutes. So now I group them. I'll still mention the first dozen. And then I put groups. My fireman friends, my high school friends, the guys who OD'd, the guys who got killed in car accidents. And it just keeps on coming. And the thing is, we're past the amount of people that died on the morning of 9/11 has been far surpassed by illness, deaths of rescue and recovery workers. We're well over 3,000 now. And I think it's like a couple a week being diagnosed with mostly cancers. And a couple a month, at least, that are dying. And I know that, some people say, well, you can't blame everything on 9/11. They're right, you can't. People die, people get sick. But not every single freaking person in your age bracket. I mean, I know more of my buddies that are sick almost that aren't. And that's frightening. But, my old truck 114, I think there's now 16 guys out of the 28 that were there that morning 9/11 that have cancers. But they call us the lucky truck because every one of us with cancer is still here. There's other trucks who only had 7, or engines that have 5, but 3 of them are dead, or 4 of them are dead. And it's strange. So you just say, you know what? Yes, let me take that gift and say, I'm still here. I'm still lucky. Please don't let me bitch and complain about nonsense. I stopped in for a coffee on the way here. Doesn't make sense drinking coffee on a 100-degree day, right? But I do. And, you see people, they unravel when the barista runs out of oat milk or whatever it is, the specialty they use. It's like, okay, just use half and half of milk. Is anybody going to get hurt? And it's funny, I was flying back. I was in Florida. I was flying last night. We delayed 5 hours. And this young girl in front of me, she's very funny. She's my daughter's age. And she was flipping out over the delay. And I said, yeah, but it could be worse. She goes, no, you're right. You're right. I'm a medical student. I see people that are dying every day. I says, thanks for healing. I said, cancer survivor, I love you guys. And we got into this huge conversation. And she says, you're right. She goes, we get so wrapped up in bullshit and we don't realize what's really important. And I always had a love and a zest for life. I really, I'm not going to lie and say that there's days that I'm not down, maybe depressed, maybe, pissed off, but I'm definitely a different person. I'm gregarious, I'm outgoing, I'm a little different. I talk to everybody because I just want people to know, like, someone gives a shit about them. And, hey, if you're having a bad day, I'll listen. But I really learned to listen in the cancer hospital. I was first in a room with this older African-American gentleman, and he was end stage of throat cancer. And they basically gave him a couple days to live, and he couldn't talk. So he would be trying to let them know like he needed something, and no one could understand him. So he waved at me when I first introduced myself when I got in there, and at that time I wasn't hooked up to the drugs and the IV and stuff. I was still a little mobile. And he waved at me to come over. So, I said, yes, sir. I forget his name. God forgive me now. But I said, and he waved, like, come in. So I put my ear down by his mouth. And he very raspily, like, was trying to express. And I could hear him. So he would say to me, pray for me. I don't have long. And I said, all right, sir. And we'd pray. And he called me back the next night, and I check on him. How you doing, sir? You good? Yeah, okay. Try to give him a little water. But I noticed that none of the nurses or the doctors would do that. They wouldn't put their ear down. They actually hear what he had to say. And I understand it. Maybe they just hygienically, but I guess they didn't think he could verbalize. So the next night he waves me in, and he says to me, can you please call my sister? She's in North Carolina. I need to let her know that I'm going. And I said, okay. I said, do they know? He says, yes, they have the number. I want her to know that this is the time I'm going. So I went out to the nurse's station and I said, Mr. Jones is trying to contact his sister to let her know he's about to pass. And the nurse goes, well, how the hell do you know that? I said, because I listened. She goes, what do you mean he can't talk? I said, no. I said, if you put your ear down to his mouth, I said, you can understand what he's saying. I said, could you do me a favor? Can you get me the number and I'll call the sister? She's like, okay. So she gave me the number. I called North Carolina. I explained who I was. I said, good evening, ma'am. I said, my name is Niels. I said, I'm a New York City firefighter. I'm in a hospital next to your brother. Oh, yes. How is he? I said, he's not really doing so great as you know, but he wants to talk to you. So I gave him the phone, and he had a little conversation with her. And then he said goodbye, and he said, I love you. And I was trying to, make out what he was saying, whatever. So he waved at me that he was finished, and he handed me the phone, and I hung it up. And I went back down, and he said, thank you. And I said, that's okay, sir. I said, you hang in there. I said, you let me know. Oh, so what had happened is they had moved me to the room next door. So now I wasn't his roommate anymore. And that's what it was. I would check in on him. So I said, okay, sir, I'll come back later and I'll check on you, okay? And he went, okay, thank you. And I went back to my room. And an hour later, I heard the beep. And I heard him say cold blue. And I got up. And I went, oh, man, I hope it's not. And I looked to the next door down, and the light was blinking. And they didn't really work him because he had to do not resuscitate. So I just went in, and I touched his leg, and I said a quick prayer. And I'm just glad I listened. And, I felt like I was doing what I used to do. And every time I went to a scene where someone was killed or crushed or burned, and there was no chance that they were going to have a tomorrow, I'd go off to the side when the rest of the guys were doing whatever we were doing. And I'd stop and I'd kneel down, I'd take off my fire helmet, and I'd touch the person's hand or, whatever was discernible after their bad day, injuries, burns. And I'd just pray and I'd say, God, I don't know if they had faith. I don't know what they believed, and I don't know what they did in their life, but I just hope that you can have some understanding and some mercy and let wherever they're going be better than this. And it didn't matter who they were. They could be white, black, brown, purple. I didn't give a shit. It was another human being, And I felt obligated because most of the time they died alone. And I was just thinking, if their spirit is fading away, I want them to see that someone cared. A stranger cared enough to say, I hope it's going to be better. And what's really ripping my soul out, some people say, I've been blessed and honored. I was involved in a podcast for the 20th anniversary, 9/11. We tried to just let people know, don't forget. And it was asking them to help tunnel the towers, which builds homes for killed and seriously wounded responders and military. And I just took it as such an honor, like to have that chance to talk to people again. And I interviewed people, some of them were just such heartbreaking stories connected to 9/11, some of them who lost their loved one, or some of them who barely got out with their life. And it was just like the common, I guess, denominator of it all was they just want to feel like someone cares and somebody will remember. And I think that's what's going on in society, is like we've become so jaded, so angry. For what? Over nonsense. Just, I know you can't go up to strangers because you'll get hurt, right? I mean, especially sometimes in this city, it's almost like an open range mental asylum. I mean, it's sad. It's just these people who are truly mentally ill cannot get help, cannot get served with what they need to make them better. But people out there in their everyday life, especially those who face tragedies, and you walk into somebody, you don't know what they're facing. Are they sick? Is their spouse sick? Or just try to let them know you care. But I remember the common denominator with speaking with a lot of these people is we were hoping for 9/12 to come back. And 9/12/01, although in the annals of history is one of the worst days ever, because it was the morning after of, the worst day in America. But yet, when you look down the West Side Highway and you looked at all the areas in the perimeter of World Trade Center, there was people lined up with posters and signs and American flags, and they were hugging, and didn't matter like what the hell they were or where they came from. Just that was out the window. And it was such a nice time in this country. It was like we were unified. But then it was just like gone away in like 6 months or 9 months. Like we got back to the normal fighting and bull crap. And now you can't have a differing opinion, and now you can't disagree with that guy, right? It's just we've come to the point we can't have conversations anymore. They're confrontations. And it's strange. It's like, how are we ever going to learn about each other if we can't communicate? And the forces that are out there don't want us communicating. They want us fighting. I don't understand it. And as a divided country, how are we going to get through the next 9/11? Because it's coming. I don't know when. Henry Miller knew it was coming. He didn't know when either. But it's coming. The problem now is 22 years later, we are fractured. We are a broken body of a country. How is that body going to withstand the pain and the beating that could come with an attack or a war or another, whatever the hell just happened with COVID? How are we going to get through that? I don't know. Me personally, I'm a big fan of God, family, country. Bring it back. You don't necessarily have to go to church, but just have a faith in something. But I'm sorry, but if you refute family and country, you're way wrong. Because that's what built this damn place, and it's just we're trying to refute it and chip it away and just make it go away, but it's not. There's people that they love this country so much. My grandpa Niels, he left Denmark. He was a young guy. He left home at 12 years old to be an apprentice baker. And he was tormented by that because he really never went back. And he joined the Navy. And he hopped on a ship and he came to America with, $30 in his pocket. And he made it. He worked his ass off. And I remember walking through Bay Ridge holding his hand. And he was an incredible grandfather. But he was trying to make up for being a horrible father. And now as a man and as a father, I totally understand it. He was He had demons. He wasn't good to my dad and his sisters and my grandma. He used to get violently drunk and rage. But his rage stemmed from his not being loved, right? He was thrown out at 12 to work. Not that his parents didn't love him, but I guess that's just what they did. But I realized he was trying to make up for it. And he would walk around Bay Ridge, and he didn't believe in banks or checks, Gramps. It had to be cash. He just didn't trust anybody. So he'd walk to the phone company. He'd walk to the electric company. He'd walk, to the bank if there was anything there. And then we'd go to the bar because he liked the bar. I'd sit and have, a shot glass of soda. He used to call it schnapps. But I just remember we'd go down by the pier in Bay Ridge. And he loved the ships because he was a Navy man. And he would, with binoculars, he'd show me the listings on the back of the ship, where they were going, where they were flagged out of, what country. And he used to call every one of them the slow boat to China. And I was just, but Gramps, they don't all come from China. And it was just his little joke. And I remember one day, he heard the Star Spangled Banner, and he stopped in his tracks, and he put his hand on his heart. He was crying. I said, Gramps, why are you sad? And he said, I'm not sad. There's tears of joy. I love this country. It's given me so much, and it's going to give you so much. And then I see people burning that same flag. Every single piece of human remains that we found at that site at the World Trade Center, didn't matter if it was a finger or a leg or a human or just a pile of flesh. We put it in a backboard, and we draped an American flag over it. And every responder and every recovery worker stand at attention, and we'd line all the way up the ramp. And as 6 people processed that human soul up that ramp, we'd stop, and we'd salute, and we'd cry, because we didn't even know if it was our friend. It was just someone. And now I get really, really pissed off when I see athletes that are making $10, $15, $20 million a year, right? You're getting paid to play a fucking game that I would have played for free. And I would go back to my fire truck for free if they would let me. And you're pissing on this country that's paying you $20 million to throw around a fucking ball or sing a song or make a fucking movie? How dare you? And I'm sorry, I'll probably get hate mail and comments. I don't care. How dare you foul-lip this country? If it's so fucking bad, I'll drive you to JFK, I'll buy you a ticket, and I'll send you to Beijing or St. Petersburg, Russia, one way. Try Ukraine. Try it out. Let me know how it is. Ain't as fucking good as this place. Yeah, it's not perfect, right? We made mistakes. I'm first generation American. I love this country. A couple years back, just down the street, I got attacked by 14s that were angry. They were angry at me. I'd never even seen them in my life. And thank God I got out of it. And I just thought to myself, how the frig could you be 18 years old in America and be so pissed off and angry? You got every opportunity available to you. You could be the president if you want. It don't matter. No one is going to stop you except for you. And that's what my father told me. No one owes you crap. Anything you want, you have to work for. You can't look at these idiot influencers and think you're going to just, you have millions of dollars in sports cars and, your body full of plastic and then stop. It's a fake digital world. Live in the real world. Live in reality. Try your best. You'll make it. And that's just what hurts, is people just spend every day bashing this great place. There's people dying to get here. They die trying to cross this border. I guess it doesn't suck that bad.
All right. Niels, thank you so much for your incredible talk.
Thanks, Mark. It's my pleasure. I'm sorry I was long-winded.
No, it's interesting.